and welcome to The Diplomat. A second North Korea-U.S. summit is in the works, and there is a country that advocates lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula and also acts as a window of communication between the two Koreas. It's Sweden. Therefore, today on The Diplomat, we invite Swedish Ambassador to Korea, Jakob Hallgren, to talk about Sweden's role in inter-Korea relations and the outlook of bilateral cooperation and exchanges between the two countries in 2019, since it marks the 60th anniversary of diplomatic ties. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Would you like to wish a Happy New Year to our viewers before we start?
I would love to. I would like to wish all the viewers a Happy New Year, whether it's according to the Gregorian calendar or according to the lunar calendar. We're in between the two Happy New Years, so I'd like to wish everybody a really good New Year.
Thank you. So it seems like the issues surrounding the Korean Peninsula, it seems like it will continue the attention from the whole world, even into the new year. And I heard that you experienced as a deputy director of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. So can you share your view on all of the issue in general surrounding the Korean Peninsula, please?
Oh, well, that is a very big question, but I would be happy to give a bit of a go on the question. And obviously, it's a question with many dimensions. I mean, I can see at least three dimensions. One is obviously the dimension of the relation between North Korea and the United States. And the second dimension is the inter-Korean dimension between North and South Korea. And the third dimension is really the regional dimension with China, Russia, and Japan as well. Whatever the outcome, or whatever the solution to this extremely complicated conflict is, it has to involve all of those three dimensions. I believe. So there needs to be a very strong denuclearization component. There needs to be rapprochement between the North and the South, and there needs to be an acceptance or an agreement from the surrounding regional powers, I would say.
I see. So unlike the majority of Western nations, Sweden has been maintaining bilateral or diplomatic ties with North Korea.
Yeah.
What exchanges are being made between the two countries?
Yeah, well, it's true that Sweden was actually the first Western country that opened diplomatic relations with North Korea in 1973, and then an embassy was opened in Pyongyang in 1975, and it has been there ever since. So I have ambassadorial colleagues that have been in Pyongyang for decades now. So, I mean, having diplomatic relations, of course, does not mean that you always, and in this case, quite often do not agree with all of the policies. But Sweden has always been of the view that you need to maintain relations maybe also with those countries with which you do not always agree.
I understand that Sweden holds a very special position on the Korean Peninsula. Would you like to tell us more about that, please?
Sure. So I think the fact that Sweden has had those relations, diplomatic relations with North Korea ever since 1973 as a formerly neutral and non-aligned and generally considered to be a Western country is one important factor. The fact that Sweden is the so-called protective power, it's a strange word, but this means that Sweden is taking care of the consular interests of the United States, Australia, Canada, the Nordic countries, etc., is also important. And then Sweden also is among the members of the so-called Neutral Nations Supervisory Commission on the DMZ. So Sweden was chosen together with Switzerland by the United Nations Command and South Korea to be a neutral observer on the border in 1953.
Not only for the Korean Peninsula, Sweden also has been actively breaching North Korea and the United States, where it doesn't have any official diplomatic ties. What would be some examples?
Well, as I said, that given that Sweden has this particular responsibility to take care of consular interests of the United States. So whenever there is a consular matter, then it would be Swedish diplomats who would talk to the North Korean authorities, maybe visit the American or, for that matter, Australian or Canadian citizen in a prison, etc. And I think that has over the years probably built a credibility both on the American and on the North Korean side for Sweden as an honest broker, as someone you can actually trust. You know, Sweden is, after all, a small country, very far away from Northeast Asia, so Sweden is not really known for having any hidden agendas or, ulterior motives, I would say.
Switching the topic a little bit to Sweden and South Korea.
Yes.
Korea and Sweden are known to have had established a close friendship even before we officially established our diplomatic ties in 1959.
Yes.
Could you give us some examples?
No, as a matter of fact, I happen to know that already in the 17th century, some Swedish officers who had been captured by Russia after Sweden lost the war somehow went to Beijing, and there they met with Korean representatives, and a text was written about Korea as the land of the morning calm already by then. And then in the 19th century, Swedish missionaries came to serve in Korea with the court of the Joseon dynasty. And actually the Swedish crown prince was in Gwangju in 1926 to excavate some of the Shilla tombs. So I think that there was a very particular golden crown that was discovered when the Swedish crown prince of the time, Gustav Adolf, who later became king. So these are some examples of early interactions between faraway Sweden and Korea.
Not that early, but also during the Korean War, I also heard that Sweden supported South Korea with medical aid as well.
No, that's very true, and that is something that I, as a Swede, feel particularly proud about, because after North Korea's invasion on the 25th of June, as you know, the United Nations called on the member states to defend South Korea. Sweden was neutral at the time, so Sweden did not have the right to send fighting forces. But Sweden and the Swedish government decided to send a Red Cross field hospital. And considering, the logistical challenges of the time, I think it's quite extraordinary to realize that a Swedish field hospital with 150 doctors and nurses arrived in Busan already on the 23rd of September. So this is less than 3 months after the outbreak of hostilities. And they stayed throughout the war, and they stayed all the time until 1957. And during those 7 years, they served more than 2 million patients. Of course, soldiers, but also civilians. And actually, also some North Korean soldiers, which was very, very controversial at the time. But, you know, the Red Cross and Sweden very much promotes the humanitarian values. So if you are not a combatant, then you have the right to get treatment. And I think this was very important for Sweden, and I think it has built a lasting bond between our two countries.
Then what is the current status of the exchange and cooperation between the two countries?
Well, I think it's a very rich and broad exchange, even though I think it could be even deeper and broader. So there's a huge industrial exchange. Both Republic of Korea and Sweden have a strong industrial and engineering tradition, but also strong on innovation and also in other areas, culture and sports, etc. So it's a broad relation, but I'd like it to be even stronger.
I see.
Yeah.
Among all of our exchanges and cooperation, I believe friendly people-to-people bridging is one of the most important thing in our diplomatic relations. And I heard that Embassy actually recently hosted a very special event related to that. So let's take a look at it.
Last November, a hotel in Seoul held the annual event Study in Sweden. Hosted by the Embassy of Sweden in Korea, the event has been introducing the distinct advantages of studying in the Scandinavian country since 2016. The event began with a congratulatory address by Ambassador Hallgren. After that, he personally explained the benefits of studying in Sweden to Korean students.
There's quite a few similarities between Korea and Sweden, and there's some exciting differences as well, which makes it particularly interesting for Korean students to come and study in Sweden and to also have future job opportunities in Swedish multinational and global companies.
Inside the booth, there was one-on-one counseling, explaining the visa process and other information about living and studying in the country. Sweden has one of the world's most generous welfare programs. For that reason, the event drew keen attention, particularly from students majoring in fields like social welfare and health.
저는 스웨덴이 끌리는 이유가 스웨덴이 젠더 이퀄리티도 굉장히 좋게 되어 있고 지속 가능성을 사람들 인식 속에 그냥 박혀 있다고 얘기를 많이 들었어요.
저는 일단 과가 보건정책 쪽이라서 스웨덴이 복지국가고 그런 분야에서 선진국이라고 들어서 그냥 어떤 나라일까 궁금하기도 했고 여러 가지 통계 자료를 보면 스웨덴이 약간 엄친아처럼 나와 있기 때문에 근데 되게 궁금했던 것 같아요. 어떤 나라일지.
There were also lectures by Swedish business leaders who explained to the students their corporate cultures and what their company sees as the ideal talent. It was the ultimate highlight of the event.
예, 한국이 최근에 아주 필요로 하는 그런 게 있잖아요. 투명성, 그다음에 공평함. 그런 메시지를 좀 우리 학생들이나 부모들한테 전달하려고.
I think traditionally, if you look in the world, that everyone perceives Korean students as very diligent. It's a great opportunity for me to get some energy from them and also to explain about my company and try to see if we can have a future together.
Study in Sweden left a lasting impression on not only the students, but also the personnel from Swedish universities who had the chance to interact with them.
And also there was some talk about Sweden as a country and the culture and similarities between Sweden and Korea. So I think it's interesting.
향후에 경력이라던가 취직할 수 있는 그런 부분에 대해서 이렇게 긍정적으로 말씀해 주신 부분이 좀 많은 도움이 되었던 것 같습니다.
Korea and Sweden have combined their resources to cultivate outstanding talent for today's global era. No doubt the two countries will make real change happen for everyone around the world.
Ambassador, what was it like meeting Korean students who are very interested in studying or working in Sweden?
No, it was great and challenging because Korean students are demanding. Korean students, just like the Korean culture and society in general, is very much focusing on good education, which I think is fantastic. So obviously they put questions about how it is like to study in Sweden. What's the ranking of the universities? What kind of courses can you take, etc. And I was particularly happy to see that many parents were there as well, which means that I realized that it's a serious commitment, or at least a serious consideration to, because I think the tradition here in Korea, if you study abroad, is very much to go to the United States or maybe to Anglo-Saxon countries, but we of course think that Sweden is a very interesting alternative. You know, Sweden has a lot of multinational companies, so even if you study in Sweden, a career within a Swedish multinational might be, or European might be very attractive.
I see. Sweden has long been ranked as most innovative and most creative countries in the world. What's the key?
Well, first of all, I must say that according to the most prominent ranking, your country is actually number 1 and Sweden is number 2. But it has been like that for several years. And that is one of the things I find amazing and really interesting with being here. Because I come from a country that has a reputation, a track record of being innovative. And I come to another country, that is South Korea, that is also innovative. And in Sweden's case, I think it's a combination of factors. It's an education that is focused on critical thinking, that is focused on both competition and individual fulfillment, but also a very strong emphasis on collaboration. And it's also a question about the collaboration between business and academia, and government. And this willingness to transform an idea, sometimes a crazy idea, into business. This is, implementation, or getting things done. Because Sweden is not a big country. And then I think that actually another factor is gender equality. So you have equal chances, even if you're a male or a female researcher. All of those things, and there are other things as well, that I think play a part in explaining why Sweden is an innovative country.
I believe the low birth rate issue that Korean society is struggling is very closely related with the gender equality issue as well. And I heard that Sweden is very top-ranked country among OECD countries when it comes to birth rate.
Yeah.
What factors do you think contributing to the figure?
Yeah. No, it's a very pertinent question. And of course, Korea is not the only society in the world or country in the world with that type of challenges. Many countries in Europe face the same challenges. And Sweden is, yes, I think we're somewhere at 1.8 children per woman in average, which is, of course, substantially higher than the rate of Korea. And as you say, I think that the gender equality is definitely one of the explanations. And I think that it's about, if you are a woman and if you get an education and you want to work, how can you reconcile that with family life? So what factors would actually facilitate for women or for a married couple to have a family, not only one kid, but maybe two or even three. Well, I think there are issues such as, you know, is there a credible daycare? How much would the daycare cost? Would the father also be, would it be socially acceptable for the father to take parental leave? And what type of benefits do you get from the government? So I can tell you that I have 3 children. They are all adolescents right now, but I actually myself spent about 7 months at home with each of my 3 kids as papa leave, and that made me understand all of the challenges of family life while my wife was working. So my wife and I, we've always worked, you know, had two careers. So all of these factors, I think, play in. But it's of course not easy to achieve that. But it's a serious and an existential issue for any society, I believe.
Right. Let's switch our topic a little bit to culture.
Of course.
What kind of efforts are being made by embassy to promote the cultural exchanges between Sweden and Korea?
Yeah, no, I'm really happy about the strong cultural program that we have been entertaining actually for many years at the embassy, and I only came to inherit that. And the flagship event is, of course, the annual film festival. Last year it was held in 4 cities, and it's held in November every year. But there's also a very strong literature exchange. So. Translation of Korean books into English and Swedish, and then of course translation of Swedish books into Korean. And this year, and I'm really happy about that, Korea is going to be the main theme of the Gothenburg book fair, and this is the biggest book fair in Sweden in September every year. But then we also have exchanges when it comes to child literature. So it's a rich intellectual exchange. But adding to that, there's been exchanges in dance and theater. So there's going to be, in July this year, there's going to be a child theater performance, a Swedish company coming over. Last year and this year, there's been an exchange between a Swedish and a Korean dance company, and a truly equal partnership where the choreographers from each company has kind of gone to the other country to set up a show, you know, with the other company. So that's really great. It's a strong suit when it comes to culture, and I look forward to developing that even further.
I'm looking forward to more exchanges too. So this is my last question. What efforts are being made by the embassy to commemorate the 60th anniversary for Korea-Sweden diplomatic ties?
Yeah, it's true that it's really a very special year, and I'm really happy that this is celebrated not only in Korea by the Swedish embassy, but also in Sweden by the Korean embassy. So I have a strong dialogue and relation with the Korean ambassador in Stockholm, and one of the first things with this is actually this. If you zoom in the camera, you will see our joint logo, which is a result of a contest that was held both in Sweden and in Korea last fall, and it was a young Korean designer who won this. I think it's a wonderfully, it makes you happy with the 2 flags, and then it says since 1959. So it's really, you know, it's our first 60 years, and we will of course continue to deepen and to develop these relations. But so what we have chosen here in Korea as our theme is come collaborate with Sweden. So we will organize a seminar every month on a different theme, whether it is innovation, inclusivity, peace and security, which are all themes that really tie us together. And then we will, of course, organize our events that we always do, such as the film festival, our big Sweden Day event in June. And on top of that, I really hope that we will get some good and exciting high-level visits, maybe even in both directions. So I think that there will be ample opportunities to highlight, the jointness between our two countries and the partnership, and find ways to further deepen and to develop that. All under the banner of this wonderful logo.
Ambassador, thank you very much for sharing your insights, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
For your time. Thanks. Our first kid, we decided to have one now. So he earned a lot by staying, but he spent a lot as well. At least for the reason that we wanted to. To me, it's very much finding the common ground. And in order to find the common ground, you need to be able to understand the other. Essentially being in the clothes of the thinking, imagining that you're in the clothes of your counterpart. And if you really do understand that, then you will find the common ground.